Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars novel review. This one's going to be for Star Wars Brotherhood, which recently came out. This is the first, I think, proper novel by author Mike Chen. I'm pretty excited for this one. I was excited when it got announced because it's a Obi-Wan and Anakin book, specifically set post Attack of the Clones. And so effectively this ends up feeling like a super early Clone Wars arc. That's the way I would say this, and that's kind of like the highlight of this. They've done an excellent job with a lot of the Clone Wars prequel related content when they've gone for it. And this is one of the ones where I think it also really works. I did read the book a week ago, and I haven't had a chance to look at it again. But thankfully with this book, I think the details of what the plot necessarily is about is not really what the highlights of the book are. The plot is fine because it obviously relates to a fun tie-in to Revenge of the Sith and explaining that line from Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith of like, that business on Cato Neimoidia doesn't count in terms of a time where Anakin thinks he saved Obi-Wan all of these times, and he seems to add in this Cato Neimoidia time. So it explains that incident, and overall that incident is fine. But you're not necessarily here for the details of that so much as you are the development of Anakin post Episode 2 and the development of Obi-Wan post Episode 2. And they play with a lot of tie-in, connective tissue to Clone Wars stuff and other related media, and it makes this book feel actually like really good. And I was actually pretty impressed by the writing, to the point where I'm kind of like, okay, got to keep my eye out for the next Mike Chen Star Wars book, because I think this was so well done. And I checked that, like, I think the only Star Wars thing he had done before this was, I think, one short story in the short story collection from a year or two ago. So this novel, I think he did it really well. So in that sense, like the spoiler aspect of this, I don't think there's too much here outside of just the spoilers that are literally this thing happens in the book. There's nothing that's going to be massively, I think, revealing as such here. So full spoilers, obviously, as we go forward. But just be aware that it's more the fun nature of a lot of the character moments that are the highlights here. So effectively the way the book breaks down once it properly gets going is that it does separate Obi-Wan and Anakin. The kind of premise at the start here is that Anakin has been knighted in the kind of months following the events of Episode 2, and Obi-Wan is not permanently on the council, but they're doing a rotation of Coleman Trevor's seat. So he's one of the Jedi who died during the attack in Geonosis. So currently Obi-Wan is technically on the council, but he's actually rotating in every couple of weeks with some other Jedi at the same sort of level that he's at. The book does end with him effectively earning the full-time slot on the council because of the way he handled himself on this mission. So that is quite good. So the separation that happens here is that Obi-Wan is sent out as basically the negotiator to negotiate, basically present the Republic side of things to Cato Neimoidia. And again, the details of the plot here get a little messy, but effectively what it's about is that it's making the point that the Neimoidians are not just the Trade Federation. The planet Cato Neimoidia is like the Neimoidian home planet, is different than the Trade Federation. So the leaders of the Trade Federation and the leaders of Cato Neimoidia aren't necessarily the same thing. And there's a sense where those people, they don't want to just be treated as automatically being aligned with the Trade Federation. And it's that sense of most of the galaxy tends to view all Neimoidians as being members of the Trade Federation, which is not actually the case. And so, you know, they're playing a little bit with the idea of connection with the Republic. The whole separatist thing is still a factor. And then notably, they do bring in Satine at times. Like she's not technically like in the book, like she doesn't interact with Obi-Wan or anyone, but like Obi-Wan overhears like pieces of news about what's going on and hears that Satine is beginning to become this leader of this kind of group of neutral systems. And so that's another factor in everything going on. And we know about that, of course, from the Clone Wars. So on the Obi-Wan side of things, you get a few references to that, which are actually quite fun. But fundamentally, it's him on his own on Cato Nemoidia, and stuff happens because as part of the kind of agreement with them to go down, Dooku kind of cuts in as just like, I also want to send someone there as well. And so Ventress is sent. Interestingly, this I guess canonically makes this the canon like first appearance of Ventress. It's basically her introduction into things, whereas like previously we had the Clone Wars micro series, which is not quite necessarily canon anymore, but it feels like this was an attempt to sort of bring maybe aspects of that back into play. In that, similarly, you get like a quick cutaway to like Obi-Wan mentions Ki-Adi-Mundi is there, and he still has bruises from his encounter with Grievous, which is obviously referencing the micro series. So because again, Grievous, we also I don't think canonically have a technical like introduction or full-on canonical origin story that's not just what was presented in like the Layer of Grievous episode. So this was actually kind of needed as like bringing like an official kind of, oh, this is I guess one of Ventress's first missions, because very clearly this is her first time encountering Obi-Wan, and it's his first time seeing her. So that's kind of fun. And the way they do that dynamic is that they don't end up like directly like fighting. It's actually Anakin at the end who ends up having a lightsaber duel with Ventress, if I remember correctly. With Obi-Wan, it's more of she basically engineers a lot of things to make Obi-Wan look terrible. Because they were meant to agree to all this stuff, like, don't bring any communicators, don't bring any other people with you, just you representing the Republic, Obi-Wan. And Anakin, like, forces him to bring this, like, secret communicator. Ventress finds that and basically outs what's going on here. And Obi-Wan had just uncovered, basically, a plot that made it seem like, okay, this, incident that happened just before on Cato Nemoidia is kind of being blamed on the Republic, but actually Obi-Wan now has evidence that it might actually be the Separatists, and how effectively he ends up getting more or less put on trial. He has to kind of flee for his life. He then realizes that, he has to argue his case here. So the kind of final sequence ends up happening where like he hides his lightsaber in like a nearby area and then sort of submits himself, hands himself over. On the Obi-Wan side of the story, there is also a other Nemoidian character who's kind of significant called Roog. And she is a kind of female Nemoidian soldier. She's like a special ops character, so she's quite skilled. She's a sniper, has a pretty cool fancy sniper that can convert from sniper mode to like kind of assault rifle mode. And she's an interesting enough character in the sense that she has her doubts about the Trade Federation, and while everyone else seems to be like very suspicious of Obi-Wan and doubtful, she actually sees what he's doing as kind of being good, and so kind of inadvertently ends up sort of helping him over the course of the mission, and shows that there's a sense of loyalty there. And it's actually a fun relationship that develops over the course of the book, in that like the ending is that she still has to be seen as being loyal to like Cato Nemoidia, even though she's helped Obi-Wan. So they have to sort of like feign this realistic looking battle that the two of them have in front of the security cameras, so it looks like she actually did try to capture him. So that made for like a pretty fun character overall. So the way this more or less ends is that Obi-Wan gives a big speech in front of everyone to get across the idea of that, like, the Republic is trying its best. We did not do this. We actually have evidence that points to the Separatists potentially doing that. There's a little bit of a, they just decide for themselves that nope, you were deceitful, and it is technically true in that like Obi-Wan did break some of the rules here, but so much of what is actually bad here that he's being blamed for is Ventress sort of like secretly using the Force to kill people, and so it looks like, oh, the Jedi did it because no one knows who Ventress is yet. So it's a quite fun early version of Ventress where she's more sort of sneaky and manipulative. She's still sort of playful in a way with Obi-Wan, and so you sort of see the start of that. But no direct, lightsaber fighting between those two just yet. Then effectively they're going to like kind of execute Obi-Wan. So this is where the questionable rescue happens. So Obi-Wan realizes, okay, they're going to kill me here. I have to do something. So he calls with the Force to his lightsaber, which is nearby. It's spinning into his hand. He's got it all planned out. And based on the way he's presented in this book, it's very much a situation where, like, yeah, he can get himself out of this situation. He got out of a situation like this similarly earlier on. I think he can do it again. So right as that's about to happen, this is when the other side of the book comes into play. And Anakin sort of like, had jumped out of the ship. He like dives down, lands right in front of Obi-Wan and activates his lightsaber. In the process, he basically lands kind of into the path of Obi-Wan's spinning lightsaber and actually gets a little cut on the shoulder as it goes by. So Obi-Wan's lightsaber gets sort of like deflected away, and Obi-Wan's just left there like calling out with the Force like, huh? And basically being like, I had this covered, Anakin. So the two of them do eventually like end up like working together here. And it's very much meant to be this book where on both sides of the plot, you have Anakin thinking about Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan thinking about Anakin, and how their dynamic has changed. Because what the book is trying to do from a character point of view is highlight how their relationship changes so much from episode 2 into episode 3, or 2 into the Clone Wars era, where they're much more friends with each other, whereas episode 2 it's almost like father and rebellious son type thing. And so here you actually get to see more of this dynamic where Anakin arrives on the scene and the two of them just step into action together, and it's like the debut of the two of them from the Clone Wars, and how amazing they truly do work together. So it's a nice moment to see. I think you get a like moment later on where like Roog watches the two of them as they just take apart like battalions upon battalions of droids, and she's amazed by how like amazing the two of them work together. But this is where the kind of conflict comes from. Anakin is, technically like, okay, I can see why he would view this as being a rescue. But Obi-Wan is like, I had it covered. Like, you literally ran right in front of my lightsaber. It was going to reach my hand. I was going to deflect the shots, and I could have got out of this myself. So it's a little bit of like kind of 50-50. They're both sort of right, but it explains that scene from the book. So from Revenge of the Sith. So that all works quite nicely, and so they have to kind of flee. And what ends up happening is that basically, even though Obi-Wan's speech that he gave was good, but technically didn't actually help the situation he was in, the Republic effectively clipped that speech and more or less ignored the actual events that happened otherwise. But just this part of the speech, they really emphasized this and highlight like Obi-Wan really spoke out for the Republic here and did a good job. And this is what gets sort of like broadcast around. And in the end, even though the mission wasn't like exactly a success, it is technically a success from like a kind of public relations point of view ultimately. And I think there's a fun moment where he then listens to Satine giving a speech about like the neutral systems, and she effectively quotes a line from Obi-Wan's speech. So there's a fun little dynamic there that I suppose is maybe more meant to set up the fact that they're sort of familiar with what each other have been doing recently by the time they meet in the Mandalorian episodes of Clone Wars. So that works quite well. Other notable scenes with Obi-Wan, mainly just that there's a couple of scenes with Dex from the diner. They're quite fun, getting across, more of like that they know each other pretty well. It definitely makes me want to get like the story of like properly, exploring how they first met and became friends. But there's a little bit more details that have gone on here. And it is to the point where like even Dex sort of like teases Obi-Wan about the whole Satine thing. And like, he's kind of like, why does she call you Ben? And it's just like a fun reference that they bring up. So, moving over to the Anakin side of things, the Anakin side of things is, I think, just as good. Like it connects in quite heavily if you read the other recently released book, Queen's Hope. I think Mike Chen even said that he got help from E.K. Johnston to write some of the Anakin Padme scenes at the start, because it is roughly the same time period in that it's like early on in their marriage and stuff like that. So there's a fun scene towards the start where Anakin brings her out on a date and they go like basically almost joyriding in a speeder, really, really fast. And it's Anakin, through Padme obviously having the money to kind of rent an actual really, really good speeder. And he thinks that he's maybe upset Padme by going like too fast, but actually like it was really fun. And it's just this actual nice, fun, romantic kind of scene that you almost wish you would got more of from Queen's Hope, but you get one of them here. The core of the Anakin side of things is obviously that it's him struggling in a way with dealing with the transition from he is not a Padawan anymore. He has been knighted based on what has happened. So what is his dynamic with Obi-Wan like? Because Obi-Wan is still his master. That's not going to change. But because he's not his Padawan, he doesn't have to be so like, in a way rebellious against him, because he can actually like speak, disagree with Obi-Wan more openly, but he doesn't know if he like should do that or not. And it's the same with Obi-Wan of like realizing that like, oh, he's not my Padawan anymore, so I can't really do the sort of almost like father-like thing with him. And when they do have their scenes together, it's a lot about them just trying to find the new balance of Obi-Wan kind of letting Anakin like sort of like speak a little bit more and be more open with their like disagreements, and having sort of their disagreements, instead of going into truly like tense scenes like it often went into in episode 2, those kind of disagreements being more fun and playful, like we sort of see at the start of episode 3 and see throughout the Clone Wars. And there's just like a kind of moment when it just kind of, in a way, on both sides of the story, just kind of clicks, and they both kind of realize what their relationship kind of is at this point, and that it is like, like it says, Brotherhood, it is more like that than anything else, and that they're not necessarily kind of father and son. That's not the dynamic. That wasn't quite right. When they're more equal, it actually does work, and that rather than their kind of opposing kind of ways of doing things causing issues, they finally get to the point where their opposing ways make for an unstoppable duo of Obi-Wan's negotiation skills, how calm he is, like in a way like the master of defense, and then you have the Anakin approach where like he's always able to adapt on the fly and come up with a new plan like instantly, whereas Obi-Wan always has to plan things out. So you get situations like where they're basically both forced to do the other style of things, where like Obi-Wan is on the run for a lot of his side of the story, so he has to do a little bit of an Anakin on it and kind of make decisions on the fly, which he maybe isn't used to. Whereas Anakin is in his story, which I'll get into in a second, is much more about him having to sort of almost be and maybe understand what it is to be a master and guiding someone else. And so planning things out a little bit more, because he's in charge of someone in this book. So yeah, the dynamic is really, really good. Again, it's one of those ones where it's hard to pick out like individual scenes, because it's just like all of them, a combination of them across the whole book, the arc of those two. It really does work well, and I think a lot of the new Disney era books have been somewhat forgettable. I think this is one of the ones where, like, if you are a fan of the Clone Wars, I think this is worth your time to read. There's not a lot of like kind of extra kind of completely new characters that are going to annoy you, that like the book focuses on them way, way, way too much. It is very much, you know, half Anakin, half Obi-Wan in the way that the chapters are laid out. You start a new chapter and it says like chapter 4 Obi-Wan, chapter 5 Anakin, and it pretty much is back and forth like the entire book, and so it's really, really to the point, and I do like that. So yeah, the Anakin story. So Obi-Wan is sent on his mission to Cato Nemoidia. Anakin thinks that, oh, am I going too? But no, Obi-Wan's like, no, you have something that you need to do. This is something that sort of like all new knight initiates have to do. So I think there's also the sense that like, okay, I've set up something for you to do, but you also have to stay here because like you have to have like a ceremony basically with the Chancellor, where he kind of welcomes all the newly promoted knights in, and Anakin is part of that new sort of like group. So there's a couple of reasons why Anakin isn't straight away just on the mission with Obi-Wan. So that happens, obviously, the whole, like, he has the ceremony where with the Chancellor. But the key thing is that the thing that Obi-Wan sort of left him behind to do is that, oh yeah, you're sort of in charge of a group of younglings before they go on their, like, their journey to get their kyber crystals. Like we saw, was it The Gathering? That's it, The Gathering. Before they go on their gathering, you basically have to, as a new knight, give a speech about what you've learned along the way. And Anakin's really freaked out by this. Like, this prospect is kind of worse than any potential mission, that he is going to have to put in charge of some of the younglings for a while and actually speak about his growth as, you know, in a way, like a Padawan to what made him into a knight. And it's fun because you see how nervous he is, and he effectively more like memorizes like a speech for himself to give, and it's very like, you know, quintessential Jedi, to the point where there's maybe no substance to it. It's just like, you know, duty, unity, you know, type thing. And he kind of doesn't quite capture the attention of the younglings, even though they're kind of impressed because it's Anakin, and they know kind of like the significance of him. But a lot of the times they're kind of like, oh, show us your lightsaber. Whereas Obi-Wan told him that, like, and no, to accomplish this, you can't just teach them physical arts or force abilities. You have to actually like teach them something that you learned truly, like personally. So it's a kind of fun one where it's actually him in a way bringing in aspects of the fact that he has a different sort of path as a Jedi, that he has much more experience of a normal life, whereas a lot of them were kids, like really, really young kids when they joined the Jedi Order, whereas he was kind of older. So he can actually bring in some of the things that he learned from his mother is actually kind of what he ends up bringing up, if I remember correctly. And this kind of ends up connecting with the kids a little bit more, and just him reflecting on his past actually gets him to talk a bit more openly with them, which is kind of nice. But that's not even like the core of the Anakin section of the book. We then begin to focus a little bit on one of those younglings in particular, the female Zabrak youngling called Mil Alabeth. So she's fun because effectively what you get in this book is these two getting paired up, and it's showing you in a way what like Anakin would be like with a Padawan, because this is set before Ahsoka enters the play. So Anakin at the start of like the Clone Wars movie is like, yeah, I don't want a Padawan, no, absolutely not. Here he's almost even more down that path because he's literally just become a knight. So he's not kind of up for this at all, but he ends up just getting, thrown along this path and kind of paired together with Mill Albeth. Now, the reason that this happens is that it's revealed that she has the, if you've read the High Republic books, the kind of Imri skill, the kind of, she's an empath, basically. And because of that, she can't control the skills that well. So when she's around a lot of other people, she can't really close off herself to their emotions. And so any group of people, she's just bombarded with emotion and she doesn't know what to do with it. It's to the point where like she can't even almost like tell or communicate effectively enough to the people training her that this is what's happening. And so it feels like she's going down the path of just being lost on her path as a Jedi. The other thing with her is that we really do get that she kind of really strongly believes that the Jedi shouldn't be like involving themselves in the war. She's kind of very much like, why is everyone so obsessed with getting their lightsaber, like a weapon? I understand like it's important and stuff like that, but everyone just wants it to have a weapon and get straight into action, commanding clones and stuff like that. That is not like typically the Jedi way. So it's very interesting to pair up a youngling who kind of is feeling that way with Anakin, who ultimately kind of thrives as a Jedi in the kind of war kind of setting. But it's a really nice pairing ultimately because Anakin is able to kind of connect with her and teach her to control her powers to a certain degree, like just get that first step so that she can just like interact normally with people. And so by the end of the book, she's been helped so much by Anakin that she's able to more communicate better with the trainers as to like, it's actually this special skill that I have that I learned more about from Obi-Wan and Anakin. And she's getting more specialized training because of that. And the idea is that she'll go on from here. And the book does tease a little bit towards the end as well that there's almost a sense that she was maybe wanting to ask, like, will you be my master type thing. But like there's just a slight, holding back on it of like, because I think as she's walking up to him, he says something to Obi-Wan of like, oh, I'm not at all ready to be a master. I don't want a Padawan anytime soon. So there's that. And it's fun knowing that I guess in like a couple of months' time, Ahsoka will be kind of thrust upon him as well. And it's just to highlight that like he's saying that he's in no way ready for a Padawan, but he can help people. And in a way, what's interesting about it is that it is a lot of like almost the fact that he does have the experience from like Tatooine and all those times that is what's helping him to kind of connect with people on this level. So, he gets communicated by Obi-Wan on the secret communicator. That's how he finds out what's going on with Obi-Wan. There's the realization eventually that, I do need to go and help him. And like I said earlier, he basically crashes Obi-Wan's escape attempt and ruins like him saving himself. But together they get out of this situation. So that is like the core of the book. Obviously there's a lot of details that I definitely would need to read the book again a second time to get them fully in line, and maybe the specific scenes of like character interactions that I may be forgetting about a little bit. But fundamentally I love the whole kind of dynamic throughout the book. Just Anakin kind of considering his relationship with Obi-Wan now that they're not Master and Padawan. Obi-Wan considering the same thing. When they actually do interact in the book, it's really, really strong. Anakin and Mill talking to each other. Obi-Wan and nearly everyone. I think Mike Chen writes Obi-Wan in general really, really well. And like the use of the new character Roog here, the little scenes with Dex, Ventress being involved. There's some very, very strong stuff in this book. Again, Not necessarily from the plot of what exactly happens, in that you're not going to be blown away by the details of the mission to Cato Nemoidia, and it's more of just the connective kind of tissue to other things. But it's really, really good character stuff. And if that's what you're kind of after from these type of books, and you liked books like, say, Master and Apprentice, the Dooku book that we got a while back, if you like those type of things where like maybe the exact events aren't stunning, but you like the character work, this is in line with that. But I think it's a little bit better because it's basically a really, really early Clone Wars arc, and that's the way it reads and the way it feels like. And I think that is just, it's an era that I think works no matter what medium you do it in. So they're my thoughts on Star Wars Brotherhood. Highly, highly recommended from me. So I'll just wrap up by making it clear that later on this week, when the Kenobi show airs, I will be reviewing, I think it's the first 2 episodes that are airing on the day. I'll have to see when I watch them what exact way I'm going to do it, because based on other shows, it's maybe going to be a lot to try and review the 2 episodes in one video. So I might do like watch the first episode, do a review for that, watch the second episode, do a review for that. So you'll see 1 or 2 videos from me on Friday, I think is when the episodes are. And then I'll continue to review the show weekly until it finishes. So look out for that as probably my next Star Wars videos following that. But other than that, that has been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Brotherhood, if you read it, your thoughts going into Kenobi as well, because obviously upcoming big Star Wars stuff. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.